June 11, 1944. The vast lagoon at Majuro Atoll in the Marshall Islands shimmered under a relentless tropical sun. Anchored in perfect formation, the ships of Task Force 58 rode at ease, their gray hulls cutting sharp silhouettes against the turquoise water. This was no ordinary fleet. It was the pinnacle of American naval might, a floating fortress of steel and aviation that dwarfed anything the world had ever seen. 15 fleet carriers, 7 fast battleships, 21 cruisers, and 69 destroyers stretched across the horizon like a city on the move. Vice Admiral Marc Mitscher, a quiet, pipe-smoking tactician with eyes like a hawk, stood on the flag bridge of the USS Lexington. He surveyed his domain with the calm of a man who knew history was about to pivot. The orders had crackled through the encrypted channels hours earlier. Operation Forager was greenlit. The Marianas, Saipan, Tinian, Guam were the targets. These islands weren't just dots on a map, they were the gateway to Japan's inner defenses. Capture them, and B-29 super fortresses could rain fire on Tokyo from bases just 500 miles away. But first, the skies had to be cleared. Japanese airfields bristled with fighters, and somewhere out there, the Imperial Navy's last carrier force lurked, ready to strike. Mitscher lowered his binoculars and turned to his chief of staff, Captain Arleigh Burke, a brilliant mind who saw war as a chessboard of time, distance, and firepower. 31-knot Burke, as he was known, had run the numbers. This task force wasn't just big, it was unstoppable. At the heart of this armada were the Essex-class carriers, America's industrial marvels. 7 of them formed the backbone: USS Essex, Yorktown, Hornet, Bunker Hill, Wasp, Lexington, and the legendary Enterprise, the Big E, survivor of Pearl Harbor and Midway. 8 lighter Independence-class carriers filled out the roster: Belleauwood, Bayton, Monterey, Cabot, San Jacinto, Princeton, Langley, and Cowpens. Each Essex displaced 27, 100 tons, stretched 872 feet stem to stern, and carried a crew of 448 men who lived, worked, and fought in a world of roaring engines and salt spray. Their air groups were symphony of destruction: 36 F-6F Hellcat fighters, 36 SB-2C Helldiver dive bombers, and 18 TBF Avenger torpedo bombers, 90 planes per carrier, ready to launch hell at a moment's notice. The math was brutal and beautiful. 900 aircraft operating from decks that could reposition hundreds of miles in a day. 4 elevators per carrier cycled planes from hangar to flight deck in 45 seconds. Catapults hurled a fighter skyward every 30 seconds in a full surge. Burke had calculated it down to the minute: launch windows, recovery cycles, fuel burn rates, ammo loads. Victory wasn't about luck, it was about outthinking, outbuilding, and outflying the enemy. And the enemy was coming. Aboard the Japanese carrier Taiho, Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa paced the bridge of his flagship, the pride of the Imperial Navy. At 300 tons, Taiho was a beast, her armored flight deck built to shrug off 500-pound bombs. She carried 75 planes, part of a 9-carrier force totaling 430 aircraft. Veterans like Shokaku and Zuikaku, the same ships that struck Pearl Harbor, sailed alongside newer fleet carriers Junyo and Hyo, and light carriers Ryuho, Chitose, Chiyoda, and Zuho. On paper, it looked formidable. But Ozawa knew the truth. His pilots were shadows of the men who'd flown in 1941. Pearl Harbor aces had averaged 700 hours in the cockpit. These kids? Barely 275, some as low as 100. Midway took 400 irreplaceable aviators. The Solomons campaign bled hundreds more. Japan's training pipeline was a trickle, America's was a flood. Task Force 58 steamed west at 25 knots, carving white wakes through the Pacific swells. The carriers split into 4 task groups, each a self-contained killer. Task Group 58.1 under Rear Admiral Joseph, Jocko, Clark, Hornet, Yorktown, Belleauwood, Bayton. 58.2 led by Rear Admiral Alfred Montgomery, Bunker Hill, Wasp, Monterey, Cabot. 58.3 with Rear Admiral John Reeves, Enterprise, Lexington, San Jacinto, Princeton. 58.4 commanded by Rear Admiral William Harrell, Essex, Langley, Cowpens. At 1 p.m. on June 11th, the first strike roared off the decks. Lieutenant Commander Charles Brewer, leading VF-15 from Essex, took 32 Hellcats screaming towards Saipan's Aslito airfield. The Grumman F-6F was a beast, 2,000 horsepower Pratt and Whitney engine, 380 miles per hour top speed, climbing to 20,000 feet in 7 minutes flat. Radar men on Essex tracked the sweep on SK sets, pinging bogies up to 100 miles out. The Japanese threw up 500 planes across the Marianas, but only half could fly. At 1:35 p.m., Brewer's Hellcats tangled with 30 Mitsubishi A6M0s. What followed was a massacre. The Zero, once the terror of the skies, was a relic 331 miles per hour, 9 minutes to 20,000 feet, no armor, no self-sealing tanks. Japanese pilots flew like rookies, holding rigid formations, gunnery wild. In one day, 147 Japanese planes fell for 11 American losses. Commander David McCampbell, Air Group boss on Essex, called it shooting fish in a barrel. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot had begun. Japanese command scrambled. Intelligence from Toi picked up American radio chatter. Ozawa got the order, sortie now. Operation Ago was on. The plan was cunning. Use land-based planes to soften Task Force 58, then hit with carrier strikes. But American codebreakers at Fleet Radio Unit Pacific were reading Japan's mail. By June 13th, Admiral Raymond Spruance, 5th Fleet Commander, knew Ozawa's every move. He made a gutsy call: keep Task Force 58 glued to the Saipan invasion beaches. Let the Japanese come to him. Range was the enemy's edge. Japanese planes could strike from 300 miles out. American combat radius topped at 340 for Hellcats, less for bombers. But Spruance bet on systems, radar, fighter direction, anti-aircraft tech. June 18, 9:30 p.m. The submarine USS Kavala shadowed Ozawa's fleet 360 miles west of Saipan, feeding position reports to Spruance. Dawn broke clear on June 19. Unlimited ceiling, 40-mile visibility, gentle trade winds. Perfect for flying, perfect for killing. At 7:30 a.m., Yorktown's radar lit up, 69 Japanese planes inbound at 140 miles. Fighter Director Lieutenant Joseph Eggert vectored Hellcats like a conductor. Lieutenant Alex Vrashu, already an ace with 12 kills, pounced from Lexington. They flew straight and level, like a parade, he'd say later. In 8 minutes, Vrashu flamed 6 planes, earning ace-in-a-day status. The first wave lost 42 aircraft before seeing a single American ship. Submarines struck next. At 9:10 a.m., USS Albacore put a torpedo into Taiho's gut, rupturing aviation fuel lines. Damage control vented vapors, straight into the ship's innards. The second Japanese wave, 128 strong, hit at 10 a.m. Hellcats shredded them at 60 miles out. Brewer's VF-15 turned it into a Turkey Shoot Redux, 97 down. American ships threw up a steel curtain, Mark 37 directors, radar-fused VT shells exploding in black clouds. Japanese survivors spoke of an invisible wall of fire. At 12:20 p.m., USS Kavala sank Shokaku with 4 torpedoes. The veteran of Coral Sea and Santa Cruz flooded fast. 263 men lost. A third wave of 47 planes arrived at 1 p.m. Only 7 limped home. The fourth wave, 82 planes, split in confusion. One group wandered north, found nothing. The other hit Task Group 58.2 and lost 30 in 12 minutes. Then, at 2:52 p.m., Taiho erupted. Gasoline vapors ignited, splitting the carrier in half. 650 men died. Ozawa barely escaped to a cruiser. By dusk, Japan launched 373 carrier planes. 130 returned. America lost 29 in combat, most pilots fished from the sea. The kill ratio? 12 to 1. Japanese pilots, green and outmatched, never stood a chance against Americans averaging 500 hours in type. June 20th, 3:40 p.m. Enterprise search planes spotted Ozawa's cripples 275 miles out, beyond normal strike range. Night recovery was suicide by doctrine. Mitscher didn't blink. "Launch everything," he ordered. 240 planes, 85 Hellcats, 77 Helldivers, 54 Avengers, roared off in 10 minutes. Lieutenant Commander James Jig Dog Ramage briefed bombing 10. "One pass, haul us home. Watch your fuel like your life depends on it, because it does." Twilight painted the Japanese fleet blood red. Avengers from below would gutted carrier Hyle. She sank in 2 hours. Zuikaku and Chiyoda took bombs. Battleship Haruna burned. The return was a gauntlet. Darkness swallowed the Pacific. Planes ditched as tanks ran dry. At 8:45 p.m., Mitscher made history. "Turn on the lights." Task Force 58 blazed, searchlights skyward, deck lights glowing, searchlights painting runways in the night. For 2 hours, carriers recovered anything with wings. 80 planes lost, but most pilots lived. June 21st dawned on a Japanese navy in ruins. 3 carriers gone, Taiho, Shokaku, Hyo. Up to 600 planes destroyed, 445 irreplaceable aircrew dead. Task Force 58 still flew 750 sorties with seasoned pilots. America's pipeline pumped 2,000 aviators a month, each with 500 hours, radar training, night ops. Japan? 50 hours in type, if they were lucky. Fuel starvation killed their training before American bullets did. McCampbell, who'd rack up 34 kills to become the Navy's top ace, put it plain. "We weren't fighting the Pearl Harbor Navy anymore. We were fighting boys who could barely keep it in the air." The Essex class wasn't just ships, it was a system, mass production, combat feedback, constant improvement. Shipyards launched one every 6 months. Damage control saved ships Japanese bombs would have sunk. Radar saw farther, guns hit harder, fighters flew better. Ozawa's report was a funeral dirge. Enemy fighter direction was flawless. "Our pilots were outclassed in every way. Our air groups are no more." Japan turned to kamikazes, suicide as strategy. By Leyte Gulf in October, Ozawa sailed 4 empty carriers as decoys, lost them all for 10 American planes. The Philippine Sea wasn't a battle, it was an annihilation. In 48 hours, American industry and grit erased Japan's naval air arm. Nimitz called it industrial democracy at war. 24 Essex-class carriers would serve through Korea, Vietnam, even the Gulf War. Lexington stayed in commission until 1991. On the Pacific floor, Taiho, Shokaku, and Hyo rest with planes in their hangars, crews at battle stations, ghosts of a navy that bet on samurai spirit against assembly lines. The lesson was cold and clear. War had changed. Courage still mattered, but victory belonged to nations that could build, train, and innovate without pause. The Essex carriers didn't just win a fight, they rewrote the rules of sea power. From citizen sailors in Newport News to pilots who turned on the lights in the dark, America proved that freedom, fueled by factories and know-how, could conquer any empire. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot wasn't just the end of Japanese carrier aviation. It was the moment the Pacific became an American ocean.